Tracy Martin.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. Thank you very much. I stand on behalf of New Zealand First to oppose the bill. I'm going to take a couple of... There's a lot in it that we wish to oppose. There's one single thing that I want to acknowledge, that inside this bill we've managed to amend a clause inside the Education Act that recognises it as the interpretation of what Pacific person means, and we were able to gain Kiribati and Tuvalu to be able to be recognised inside that Act because they are now part of the New Zealand community. So that's a big up, that's a big win. Thank you very much. That was it. That was the positivity that came out of what was the most bizarre select committee I've ever sat on. It was very, very, very interesting. Now, I just want to take make this point too about the National Party member who spoke last. Not a single school came to submit to us on Teach First NZ. Not a single school came to submit. I go to the comment that the member made suggesting that a whole lot of schools came to submit to us. Not a single one. So I thought that was a very interesting participation. Now I want to go back to make sure we put on the record the background of how we got this supplementary order paper, first of all. Nobody heard a word about it, but where this came from was, back in December 2015, there was an Employment Relations Authority determination that the employment of Teach First NZ graduates who were largely untrained teachers was illegal. That was a determination of the Employment Relations Authority back in December 2015. And why was it illegal? Because they were shoulder-tapped to go into jobs inside schools. They were shoulder-tapped to go inside jobs inside state schools. That meant that registered and qualified teachers were disadvantaged, Mr Speaker, because they couldn't apply for the job. The Teach First NZ, they're not graduates. I mean, they're graduates of a degree, but they're not teaching graduates. They were able to go in there with a job that was not advertised and get that position. So that was why it was deemed illegal. Now, so after that case, after that employment relations case, the PPTA, the Ministry of Education and Teach First NZ came to an arrangement. Teach First NZ said, we don't have a problem for our graduates to have to apply for advertised positions. We are confident in our young people that they are totally capable after a 6-week Christmas course, 6 to 8 week Christmas course, of being able to be put in front of the classroom, unsupervised in front of the classroom, but with the support, and recognition of Auckland University. And that was the arrangement that was in place until suddenly, in this Education Amendment Bill, with no notice to anybody at all, after the full period of submissions had been said, a supplementary order paper came in from Minister Parata. And then there was an enormous row, the biggest row I've ever seen at a select committee, which is normally a collegial environment, because the government members decided that this wasn't a big enough change. This wasn't a big enough change to actually ask anybody inside the education sector whether they should, if there was anything that we should be concerned about it. And so there was the biggest spat I've ever seen inside a select committee. And strangely enough, we ended up where the government overturned their original position around not having any submissions, and we opened it for 2 weeks. So a 2-week period of submissions. I can tell you exactly how many submissions we had. We had the PPTA, we had the NZEI, we had Teach First NZ, 2 members from Teach First NZ, we had a gentleman from a teachers training college down in Christchurch, and that was it. That was it on this bill. And the only people to speak in favour of this particular amendment was Teach First NZ themselves. And now, why should they do that, do you think? Well, what's interesting is, if you have a read about what this bill actually does is, it gives Teach First NZ a monopoly to have the Secretary of Education designate positions at a school for the employment-based teacher trainee. This is the really large title that the ministry came up with, because to call them trainee teachers, well, that's already been taken. Student teachers has already been taken. Teachers are teachers, actually registered and qualified. They've done the hard yards. So they had to come up with another way of saying this to try and suggest that these individuals who are going to stand in front of our children, quite possibly from year 1 all the way through to year 13, have some form of qualification. They actually should be called apprentices, because that's what they technically are. They're learning on the job. They're apprentices. They've done a degree, and good on them. They've done a degree in science, biology, engineering, whatever. And then, supposedly, after an 8-week block course, 6 to 8 week block course, they can now stand in front of 5-year-olds, because that's what this legislation allows them to do, stand in front of 5-year-olds and kid those parents that they are teachers. They are not teachers. And if there is a barrier to these young people becoming teachers because 1-year teacher training is what, too long for them? Too expensive? Then for goodness sake, give them a scholarship and put them through the whole 1-year training and then only allow them to teach in secondary schools. Only allow them to teach in secondary schools. Ms. Parada rants on that they do 2 years. They do 2 years as apprentices in the classroom practicing on real live children. Real live children. And that is not good enough. That is not enhancing the profession. That is not raising the status of the profession. That is not good enough for our children. Parents have the right to know that the person standing in front of their child has been fully qualified before they get there. And if they're not good enough, they shouldn't be there practicing on them. And so there was another way to do this. There is no way that New Zealand First will actually support that sort of amendment. Let's talk about this, the suggestion that there's all these people asking for principals that to be able to be principal across several schools. Now, I think what Mr. Muller said was really, really interesting. He said a contractual interface, that the principals can have a contractual interface with a variety of schools. Now, I think he's hit the nail on the government's head. Because they see this as a business. The government sees this as a business. They have no concept whatsoever that principals are the leaders of teaching and learning inside of a school. They have no concept about how hands-on a principal inside a school is. They set the tone and the culture for the school. And I think what's interesting is the only way that this will work for multiple boards is actually the principal will become a contractor. The principal will have to become an independent contractor. It will not be an employment agreement, because how could a principal have 5 employment agreements unless they are contracting part of their time? So this is a move, and I think it's a really interesting move, to turn principals into contractors. And the other thing we've got here, let's just go to charter schools and this dual provision that's in this bill. Charter schools are funded in a cashed up way. They're bulk funded basically in a cashed up way that includes the property dollar. The property dollar is supposed to be given to provide all the technical classrooms and so on required for them to deliver the curriculum for those students. Now what's happened? Charter schools haven't spent their property dollar. They've banked it. They've banked it, or they've paid themselves big salaries to their CEOs or whatever, and now they want to use the technology rooms of other schools, the state schools that have to provide them for them. So on one hand, they've been given the money to provide the technology classrooms. On the other hand, they've banked it and decided they're going to use somebody else's. And the other schools, the state schools, are required to maintain. They're required to put in their to shift around their own timetable so that they can facilitate. It's another failing of charter schools. Charter schools, if you're given the dollar, spend the dollar. And I think the last thing, sir, is around the opening hours. Schools could already do exactly what this amendment said. There's one major change. The schools have to consult with business. Before this bill, they did not have to consult with business. This bill says they have to consult with business about their opening hours. And I guarantee you, sir, this is not about shortening opening hours. This is about extending opening hours to suit the workplace, not to suit children and not to suit parents.
I call Melissa Lee.